Thank you all for creating some space to join us in this conversation today. I've been tasked with introducing our speaker for today. Before I do that, my name is E.J. Eddy. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion. I'm really excited about making this introduction, and I'll tell you why after I make it. Dr. Frederick Gooding is an Associate History Professor and is the inaugural holder of the Ronald E. Endowed Professor of Humanities at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. Featured in national outlets such as the New York Times, USA Today, and Associated Press, Dr. Gooding is a professor of pop culture who engages audiences on subtle racial patterns hidden in plain sight. Dr. Gooding has also provided social commentary on CBS, Fox News networks, and he has reached an international audience with messages of racial healing throughout the podcast Reconcile. Dr. G, as he's affectionately known, also currently serves as chair of TCU's Race and Reconciliation Initiative, designed to study TCU's relationship with slavery, racism, and Confederacy, and is the proud curator of the Green Book Historical Exhibit at Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. Dr. G is an amazing person. I had the pleasure of having dinner with him last night, and I know that you're about to hear from a scholar who cares deeply about people, about their connections to place, and their connections to their history. It's my honor to introduce Dr. G.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. How you doing? Well, I am super fantastic. Thank you for asking. Absolutely. I would love to just give a shout out and say thank you to the wonderful team at the Center of Study of Southern Culture. I would not be here if it wasn't for our colleague from afar holding it down, suffering Broadway plays in New York. That would be Afton Thomas, right? I'm also very grateful to my gracious host, Katie McKee, and all my dinner guests from last evening. I just know what it's like when you go to an evening event. It has to be pretty important, right? And so, with everything that people are juggling, I'm very grateful for, Castile, EJ, Lauren, and Zaire spending some time with me. So thank you all, and it's good to be here. And with any further ado, I would like to just go ahead and just get started. I have a couple thought concepts I'd like to put out on the table. And then as the Spirit moves you, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll stay after for a little bit of Q&A as well. So the official title of this presentation is I Don't Want to Say the Wrong Thing, right? How to reconcile with race in the classroom. Because when it comes to talking about race, unfortunately, it still can be a touchy topic, right? For some of us, right? And so what I would like to do is try to alleviate some of that apprehension and fear by just remixing it, right? And so in other words, rather than focus on our fears, let's focus on the positive. And so what we're going to do is talk about some key takeaways in talking about the concept of reconciliation. And what I'm going to do is introduce the concept and provide some tangible examples, right? So this all won't be theory, but provide some tangible examples. Again, I'm not an expert on reconciliation, but I'm a practitioner, right? And what I can do is just be honest about what has worked for me and my community, with the idea that there might be some seed of inspiration that might work for you, right? Because I think one of the pieces that is important to note is part of my success was from being inspired from talking to other people, right? Knowing that I was not alone, and University of Mississippi is one of the places that I visited, and so it's nice to be back. All righty. So, isn't that right, Beyonce? Get it? Okay, just warming y'all up. But what's the point? The point is, for those of us who are a little confused, this is not a picture of Beyonce. Who's this a picture of? Okay, and so this just happened from which news company? BBC. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to break the news to you, but race is still an issue, right? We're still grappling with this concept of identity. And how do we talk about our history and representation? It's still an issue that's live, today. And so, speaking of Oscars singing Viola Davis, I was reminded of last year's events. I'm not going to talk about that, but I thought what was fascinating from last year's events was there was this effort, if you would, to talk it out and reconcile, right? And so I think when you talk about reconciliation, it's something that I would like to dig a little more deeper into in terms of how do we navigate conflict. And so lastly, before I get into some of the keys here, this is not just me, but when we talk about... So when we're talking about, alarm bells that are running here, the bottom line is you can see for yourself, the President of the United States of America just issued a proclamation for Black History Month. And if you take the time and read it, it's actually pretty telling in terms of whether you agree with it or not. But what's fascinating is this idea that we're still trying to wrestle and grapple with how do we move forward in time and how do we recognize our history, right? So again, don't take it from me, but all over, I think there's signs and hints that we still have some work to do, right? But what a great place to do it here at a university where arguably we're about ideas. Okay, so our roadmap is to talk about these 5 keys, and hopefully we'll have a fruitful conversation as a result. So where to begin? Why don't we start at the very beginning, and that is with the number what? 1. I respectfully disagree. No, that was a setup. That was a setup. That was a setup. That was a setup. That's a setup. This is a setup. This is a setup. Okay, this is a setup. 0 is a number, right? For example, how many of us would prefer a check for $1 as opposed to a 1 and several zeros behind it, right? 0 is a number. 0 is a number. And so first, what I'd like to do at the very beginning is start off with recognition. It has come to my attention that the Croft Building, the Lyceum, and the very building in which we sit presently was built by some of us who were enslaved. I mean, I just don't want to overlook this detail, right? That in a land where freedom is cherished and democracy is valued, that we're talking about constructing an environment where students in the prime of their youth are able to feel free to explore ideas with their unlimited imagination. We're talking about we still are connected to this past, right? So the past is always present with us as we move forward into the future. So I just want to recognize the labor of those who are unnamed and unknown, but it's not in vain. Right? Not in vain. And I would also like to recognize those of you who took time out of your day to be here, right? I mean, there's a big world going on out there and people have places to go and things to do, but you made it important to be here because it's important to you. And I agree with you, right? So I'd just like to start off with that recognition. But going back to step 1, right? Let's talk about research. Now, do me a favor and just pair up with the person next to you and come up with a brief description as to what just occurred. I'll give you about 2 minutes, and I'll check in and get some feedback. Simple. All right, 1 minute. 1 minute. righty. So, can I get just 3 volunteers to share out what they came up with? Why don't we start with someone from the back? Because, people in the back get no love nowadays, right? So someone from the back, share out what you and your partner discussed. Yeah, please, yes, tell us.
So we saw the impact of gravity, but in order to see the impact of gravity, you had to let go of the pen.
Okay.
As a result, for stuff to happen, you got to let go of stuff.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Wait, where's my warning bell? I wasn't prepared to go that deep. Okay. All right, very good. Can we get another, I guess, an accounting of what just happened? Anyone else?
I mean, we can say we just said the pen dropped.
You said the pen drop. Okay. Can I get a third set of volunteers to share out with it? Yeah. What did y'all discuss?
We said that you intentionally dropped it because, saying dropped kind of infers that it was an accident, but you did it with intent.
Okay. So what's the point of this exercise? The point of this exercise is that from our 3 accounts thus far, how similar are they? Hello? Is my mic still on? Are they the exact same accounts or no? Not the exact same, but they're similar, right? They're describing the same thing, but...
We never accounted for gravity.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay. Good.
Nor intentionality.
Okay. What did you all say about it? I'm just curious.
Well, we said that the speaker went over
Uh-huh.
to the center of the room,
Okay.
held out a pen or pencil,
Okay.
and then ceremoniously dropped it.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah. I'm going to take y'all on the road with me, ceremoniously. Okay. Now, notice that description, in so many ways, is similar to the pen dropped. I mean, you all talking about the same thing, but it's still different, right, in terms of the context, detail. And then this description over here went into the forces of, physics, right? So what's the point? The point is this. What's fascinating is that even though we were all here at the exact same time and place, right? Like no one's over at the stadium, no one's downtown Oxford, at the snack bar, what have you, right? We all saw the same thing, but the question is, did we all see the same thing? Right? And so if I had to choose whose version is the right version, whose version out of the accounts I just heard from, which one can I say is the correct version? We all saw it, we all experienced it, but based upon perspective, some people decided to include more details, some people didn't, some people started the story at a different point in time versus others. So already, it's a profound question as to how do we recount our experiences. And so what I learned very, very, very early on when serving as chair of our Race and Reconciliation Initiative is that history is not only powerful, it's personal, and because of what we just discussed, the element of, again, we all pride ourselves on being true and unbiased, but there's an element of subjectivity with which we must contend. And so therefore, history is political. Let's just be honest about this. Let's just be honest. And for me to choose, who's to say which one is right, which version is not? Okay? So, one strategy to cut through some of the variance and nuance and contention that comes about. I mean, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. We are still arguing over how to remember the past, whether it be critical race theory, that, as you know, came up in the news just, roughly a year ago, right? Before then, I guess everything was well with the world. And then we have states such as Florida that are saying, no, advanced placement African-American studies has no place here, right? So advanced placement, AP, right? So we're still having contention over what parts of the story do we include, what do we tell, okay? My strategy to share with you all is one way to build a firm foundation of faith is with facts, okay, okay? And so that's where the research comes into play, right? That's where the research comes into play. And so to the extent that you are able to, at, say, your university setting, leverage more so, the archives that exist, the student newspapers, the yearbooks, then it's not you and your opinion, because that's easy for us to shoot you down. Of course you have a skin in the game. Of course you have some sort of agenda. Then it's a matter of, let the facts speak for themselves, right? Let the facts speak for themselves, right? And so that's why it was so very important that when we took on this project to create some sort of deliverable, right? And what we did was we created a first-year survey report that essentially was us going through, when we talk about, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Well, again, there's no fear in saying the wrong thing when you're just being factual, right? I'm just merely presenting to you what has already been said. This is not what I said, right? And so we went into the archives. We found some pretty damning and alarming pieces from student newspapers and yearbooks. But whether again, it's another argument as to, but that was the time and that was normal. Okay, that's fine. But the bottom line is, here's how many times they used the N-word, right? It's here, right? They printed it. I didn't print it, right? This is 1921. I was not alive at that point in time, okay? And so I think the research is key because so many people had questions. Can you prove it? Can you prove it? And the answer is, well, sure, it's not a problem, right? There's no defensiveness involved. The answer is yes, we can, right? And here you go. And I think what was also key was getting top brass involved. And so with, I don't know about you all, but at least at our university, if the chancellor puts his name on it, then all of a sudden, it's legit, right? And it's important and people, pay attention. Now, knowing the power structure and the way we operate, we strategized to make sure that we included the chancellor, with this statement that he wrote, right? But that's the name of the game. It's the name of the game. It's the name of the game. Bottom line is he signed off for it, and so I guess he deserves credit for that, right? Well, I'm not trying to take away props from anyone. Okay. All right. So moving on to number 2, report. Now, when I say report, I'm not talking about necessarily a written piece. I'm talking about something a little bit more broader. So let's do another thought experiment. It's around that time of year to celebrate the winter holidays. And so this family is celebrating Christmas. Other people celebrate different things. And mom calls out to Sally, Sally, can you go in the garage and check and see whether the lights are working? In order for Sally to report back, what does Sally need to do?
Find the lights, plug it in, and see whether it comes on or off. She might also have to verify that that particular socket is actually working so that if the lights didn't come on, it's not because of the socket.
I'm taking your class, by the way. I'm registering after we're done. Okay, yes, absolutely. So notice, I agree, by the way, but notice all the steps involved, right? And so the mother is already presuming or assuming that Sally has the wherewithal to go through these steps. A, find the lights. B, plug them in and make sure they're working. It's not just, oh, mom, here are the lights, and dump them at her feet. But the idea is, you can go through these steps. But not only that, but Sally might also seek a clarifying question. Oh, but mom, do you want me to check on the Christmas tree light too? Right? No, I just want you to focus only on the lights for around the tree. We have a new light this year, right? So what's the point? The point is, when it comes to reporting, oftentimes assumptions are made. So let's go back to Sally again. And this time her father calls out and says, listen, I think we're getting low on garbage bags. Can you please check to see if we have enough? Because if so, I'll pick some up at the store, right? What's enough? What's enough, right? So Sally might look and see there's one left. Yeah, Dad, we have enough. Right? Yeah, the parent joke, you get that, right? Right. One may not be enough, right? 3, is that enough? For some of us who, with the pandemic, we're, panic buying, like one box may not be enough. So the point is that there's oftentimes negotiation that has to take place, and you should not be afraid at the beginning stages of your work to lay out the boundaries of your sandbox, right? And to negotiate vigorously, right? All the steps necessary before you report back. Because what you don't want to do is set yourself up for failure. You want to set yourself up for success. And the key way to set yourself up for success is by understanding exactly what the other person is expecting and knowing exactly what you can provide, right? I mean, because Sally might have to say, but Mom, I can't reach the lights. And then that might be the end of that mission, right? Otherwise, if she says yes, and then, Sally, did you check the lights? Sally, I really couldn't reach the lights. Yeah, no, they appear to be fine. That might open up a whole host of other problems that are unnecessary for Sally, right? And so what I did is I came up with this brainchild called Operation Triangulation, because now we're in year 3 of a 5-year plan. But you have to recall, when we first started, there was only a 1-year commitment, okay? Many schools like us, in the aftermath of George Floyd, wasn't there a couple changes on this campus in the aftermath of George Floyd 2020, right? So, I mean, it was this groundswell of momentum, and so who knows if that statute would still be out in the quad right now if it wasn't for that momentous moment, right? So our school, like many others, decided, we need to do something. And it wasn't just our school. I mean, I'm getting emails from Bath, Bed and Beyond about we stand with Juneteenth. Like, well, what happened to Juneteenth the last 18 years, right? You didn't send me an email about that, but okay, be it as it may, I appreciate it. So the idea was this. When they called me and said, hey, do you want to be chair? I was skeptical, okay? Because I was concerned that this was a knee-jerk reaction, okay? And this was just, a means to placate, the public in terms of, yes, we appear to be doing something. I was quite skeptical. And talking with the Queen, she's from Trinidad, by the way, she just said, listen, there's only one way to find out, right? So that's what really motivated me to get involved and have a seat at the table. But I was concerned about this being a setup from the get up, right? So all of a sudden, it's a dumpster fire. Oh, let's ask the brother to go over here and, fix it. Okay? Time out. So we had to negotiate. Operation Triangulation. What I decided was that, listen, we're celebrating our sesquicentennial this year, okay? I said that in one take, sesquicentennial, thank you, right? So that means 150 years worth of history. You all tell me, how feasible is it to tell thoroughly 150 years, a century and a half worth of history in less than a year's time? We're talking 9 months academic year. Let's throw in a 4-week winter break and a 1 week for spring break, and volunteer staff, right? All volunteer. Wait, so is this a recipe for success? No. Why am I stepping into a situation like that? Where I'm going to look bad, the university looks bad, everybody looks bad. And then the students, most of all, are frustrated. Nothing happened. Operation Triangulation. Listen, I said from the very beginning, you know what? How about if we can't do 150 years, let's not. What we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 key windows in time. So in other words, we took the control and power back in defining our boundaries of the sandbox. This is what we're going to do. We're going to look at these 3 windows in time because these are the windows I theorize that most people had the most questions about, right? The founding years, the transition to integration, when did it happen, how did it happen, who's against it, who's not, and then what has happened recently, right? Because not until recent, when I say like the 2016s or so, were students a bit more vocal and active and making their needs known. For example, we have a comparative race and ethnic studies department that was started all because of student activism and intervention in 2016. So I wanted to be able to speak to that. Not to mention, we also had an outbreak of student voices in 2020, January 2020 as well, right, before George Floyd, okay? And so, again, by being very clear at the onset, right, so this is like around October when I finally figured out, oh, okay, I think that really took a lot of pressure off us as a team and helped manage the expectations for the public, right? And so our report, you can look it up, it's nice, concise, 35 pages, speaking only to these 3 sections. And what we said is, listen, because remember, we only had a 1-year commitment at that point in time. And so arguably the strategy worked when the Board of Trustees signed off for it and optioned for another 4 years to say, let's keep going. Because the argument was at that time that, well, if there's a need and interest, well, we can always scaffold and add on, right? You can always add on and grow. But the pressure of, well, let's figure it all on the first time up, no. Party people, do not do this to yourselves, right? It's hard enough as it is. Moving on. Dissemination. All right, so anyone been to a wedding before? No one believes in love? Okay. All right. I've been married 25 years, okay, so, it's been a while. But I believe there's a custom, right? So when the bride is throwing a bouquet over her shoulder, why is she doing this? What's the theory behind this? Okay, so obviously she and I went to the same school, right? But yes, so the custom is that if the bride throws the bouquet over her shoulder, that whoever catches it is going to get married next, right? So I know it sounds random, but in thinking about this concept, I thought about, well, what's the point in throwing the bouquet over the shoulder if no one's there to receive it, right? So in terms of our scenario, let's not forget the other detail about COVID, right? Where we're mostly online at the time as well, right? Just to add to the difficulty. So what I theorized and reasoned was that, well, we do this report, but who cares if it's an email sent out on a Thursday afternoon sometime in late April, right? Who cares, right? So the idea was that I reasoned that we had to create a community that would be receptive for whatever it is that we decided to come up with. We had to create community, okay? We had to create community. And so what that meant was making consistent deposits in the bank of public trust, right? I don't think people would have been as supportive if we said, okay, this initiative has been created in August, and we'll talk to you in April once we've figured it all out. No, the idea was along the way, how do we consistently make these deposits? And so what we did was in terms of I don't know what to say, we listened to our students. I cannot take credit for this. It is the brainchild of my graduate student, right? And the idea was that, well, listen, how do we create an audience? Well, you're thinking of a report and sending it out in a link and what have you, and that has its value. But in the meantime, how can we make contact with people? How can we let people know what we're doing? And so we came up with this idea of creating a podcast. And listen, at first I was skeptical, and I said, okay, fine, great. But on the left, it's small print, forgive me, but these are a list of all the countries, apparently, in which the podcast has been heard. You all can check out the link yourself. But what we wanted to do is highlight the good people on our campus who are already doing the good work, right? That's the idea. So we're not badass and coming up with something new. No, there's already good people doing a lot of good work. And so we wanted to highlight that and talk to them. What does reconciliation mean to you? And what are the things that you're doing? And what do you struggle against? And what are some of the obstacles? And what are some of your victories, right? And so this really served as a connecting tool in creating that audience. And then not only that, but we also promoted an end of the year experience based around the report that I'll get to in a moment. Number 4, discussion. So, going back to Sally, she, after finishing her homework, decides that she deserves a treat. And so she asks Mom, I finished all my homework. Can I have some ice cream? Mom doesn't say no, but she does to Sally what so many of our parents have done, and that is say, well, I don't mind, but you need to ask. Oh boy, I mean, come on. Just tell me no, right? Why are you gonna set me up like this, right? So Sally goes and asks Dad, and he says no. But that's not the problem. Sally goes, why? Why can't I? And he says, because I said so. And that's the end of the discussion. Oh, poor Sally. Poor Sally. So here's the deal. It is the father's prerogative to say no, of course. And on a campus, oftentimes when you're advocating, when you're pushing, when you're speaking truth to power, there are times when you go to administration, you go to authority, and you'll receive the answer no. That's not the crime. The crime is the end of discussion, okay? So no is not the problem, no discussion is. And so I think one of the gems I would like to share with this one is we had to learn very early on that it wasn't a matter of us getting emotionally invested in, trying to hear that first yes, but if anything, using any contact that we have as a means for information gathering. So with continued dialogue, the question is, well, why are you arriving at this no? Like, what are some of the barriers to you saying yes? And so by involving administration in more extended dialogues, we were able to actually extract more information that allowed us to eventually get to some of the yeses that we were looking for. Not all, but some for sure, right? And so I think the key is building in time for discussion and discourse. And part of that building time and space for discussion and discourse requires extra effort in creating programming space. Can someone ask me how many programs did we put on that first year? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. We only put on So here's the question, right? Well, why would you put on 90 plus programs? I'm not advising anyone for your first year leadership or have you to put on 90 plus programs. That's not what I'm advising, okay? But at the same time, I guess the question I was asking myself is, am I trying to do this or not? And so my philosophy was, I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. And during that time in space, I had the time and space to invest, and so that's what I was able to do. Now again, many of us might have different obligations and different constraints, and that's fine. But what I wanted to demonstrate to my campus community was that whether it's success or failure is up to you, but what you will not say is that we as a team did not put in the effort. That's what you will not say. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
I just wanted to clear in my mind, is this like 5 different things 90 times, or one thing 90 times? Or are you saying you prepare 90 completely different things and
Yes. Yes. So no, we did not do the same thing 90 times. We literally did 90 separate things. Again, some of them were small, in scale. It might have been because it was COVID time. Us just sitting outside, social distancing under a tent, just to talk about race, right? And others were much more pronounced. And I'm happy to share that we established a Mississippi connection, and we were able to introduce to our community an individual and a story that unfortunately not a lot of people are still familiar with. Because in the promotion of this event, because this is a win-win, not only did we create this virtual event, but we opened it up to the community. We felt that this was too large to only keep in-house, right? I mean, this is a national, conversation, right? And so, but in the process of us promoting this event and telling local high schools and middle schools, or even people on our own campus, we would get the reflexive question, but who is Emmett Till? I mean, and again, some of you are shaking your heads, but this is what we're dealing with today. We can't assume that everyone, has the same experiences. We demonstrated this at the very beginning, right? We can't assume this. I can't tell you how frustrated I am oftentimes with incoming, first-year students, and I tell them all the time, you need to go back to high school and demand a refund, right? I mean, but honestly, it wasn't a matter of shaming or blaming. It was a matter of saying, okay, well, let's meet you where you're at, and here's where we need to go, right? And so, yes, we did feel it was necessary to have that high volume based upon our demographic and our student body, right? Based upon where they were. But in addition to that, in the process of that, that momentum train really building up, and we had a lot of visibility on campus. And so with such a volume like that, we ended up literally becoming our own brand. I don't know if you all see in the t-shirts, but very rare, but the university fashioned its own logo for us, right? And in fact, we gained so much momentum that we were even included. Anyone see the college football playoff championship game? Okay, well, it wasn't that important to watch the whole game, right? Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, 3 hours, yeah, okay. Well, the thing is, if you're watching the game, you may have seen this commercial, right? Don't blink, y'all, don't blink, right? Well, you may have seen this commercial. Check it out. What? Wait, what? Okay. Yeah, I think we might have had more screen time than the offense did. Yeah. So, yeah, that was tough. That was a tough day at the office. Okay, but the point, though, is, so it's not to say, oh, look at me, but just in terms of, think about what that says. I mean, you're talking about, you're paying millions of dollars, right, millions of dollars, national audience. What does that say in terms of, from the university perspective, about the profile that we built, right? If they thought, well, you know what, let's also include this, because if we don't, so that goes to show you how, in a positive way, we were able to build up that momentum, right? And as they say, all's fair in love and war. And so we hosted, we teamed up, partnered with local black businesses. So this is, we had an event at Black Coffee. It's called Black Coffee. So that was awesome. And again, the idea is you get a free coffee if you venture off campus and go into the community, right? Because no, for some of our students, getting off campus is going to Target and back, right? That's it. And so we wanted to foster that community connection. We actually did yoga together because, as you all know, this can be very stressful and exhausting oftentimes when you're asking or, advocating and you're hearing no all the time, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we're being holistic and taking care of ourselves. We, similar to as Brother Don Guillory did with me this morning, and if you haven't, you need to go ahead and register, and take that dynamic tour. But we also, in terms of the way the universe works, had a very similar idea in terms of creating a heritage walk, right? An idea was walk with us, right? That was the tagline, walk with us, right? And we, we're purposeful and intentional about creating stops that factored in what we call the many shades of purple, right? Whether it be military, whether it be our Latinx, our Native American brothers and sisters. I mean, we have only a small plaque, but still, a lot of people don't know about it. It's just there. A lot of people pass by it every day. So, I mean, and not to mention, of course, African American history, and so. These are some of the interventions that we had, and speaking of which, when I talk about that report, remember, we didn't want to just throw it to, over the shoulder to concrete in the ground. So the idea was, I had the brainchild about, well, let's not just send out an email, let's create an event, right? Because I believe that most people in the world are good. Right? Most people in the world are good. That's what I believe. Of course, we have to account for Dallas Cowboy fans.
Thank you.
I suppose the sun shines on them too. I don't know. I'm not sure, But I believe most people in the world are good, but we're often limited by what I call the 3 E's. We're limited by education, exposure, and experience. Okay? So education, as you can see, the research, the exposure, the number of programs, right? And then experience. The key was to create a shared experience. Think about how, for those of us who've gone on a trip, it can only be like 3 days or a week, but it can be so memorable because of that shared experience. Obviously, whether it be family or friends, but that idea of a shared experience. So we strategically created a shared experience whereby the report was released, all the dignitaries were invited, because remember, leverage. The idea is that you said publicly, when you created this, it was important to you. So when I send you the invite saying, okay, now it's time to deliver a report on something you said you created, are you going to show up or not? Right? Easy. So all the dignitaries showed up, right? And it was amazing, right, to have our community come together so we could move forward together. That was the idea. No, we're not perfect. Yes, there's still a lot of work to be done, but at the very minimum, let's glimpse what I call the art of the possible. Okay? And so that brings us to number 5. Determination. All righty. If I were to ask you to cross this chasm, what would you say? Why are you shaking your head, sir? Why are you saying no?
I'm looking at how deep that is, and my mind's saying no. My body's saying no as well.
My mind's telling me no. You said my mind's telling me no. Okay. All right. My mind's telling me no. Okay. Yeah. And oftentimes, this is how many of us feel when we're tasked with, just can you save the whole university? Right? Right? No, when it comes to that race thing, can you just save the whole university? It's like, well, how am I supposed to cross this chasm? Like, you want me to step across into the dark abyss? Are you kidding me? Well, here's the thing, though. For those of us who haven't seen how this plays out, allow me to reveal what happens. Okay, so I understand life is not a Hollywood movie, but at the same time, you'd be surprised when you make a determination and take that first step, how the universe will conspire to assist you. You would be amazed. You would be absolutely amazed. And so, again, I think that part of the inability for us to achieve is the way the talk was framed. The fear, right? I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to make a mistake, right? Ladies and gentlemen, where else but a university should we not try and test ideas out? I mean, we are precisely positioned at the place where we can experiment, where we can try ideas, explore them, and see what works. It's not a matter of getting it perfect, but it's a matter of making that effort. We're uniquely designed as a university community with so much young brain power and creative talent, right? I mean, how many PhDs does it take to open up, put in a light bulb, right? We have so much brain power here, but yet we can't figure out how to make important, right? No, I disagree. Let's challenge these creative minds we have. Faculty, administration, staff, alumni, students. This is precisely the place to brainstorm and come together so long as we determine that this is important. We figured so many other things out, right? Why can't we figure this out, right? No, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And to that point, what's fascinating is, just so you all know, I'm a human being too. I'm in the cupcake shop the other day with the queen. And, I'm here debating, like, should I pay $4 for sugar, right? I'm just here debating. And so while I'm sitting here at the counter, I noticed that the young lady, white, really didn't engage. Right, we're standing at, we're kind of doing this, and she really didn't engage. So what do you think I'm thinking? Okay, no one heard what I slipped in there? I said there's a woman behind the counter. I said she was what? Okay, so you heard that. So what do you think I was thinking? Pause. Wait a minute. Is anyone feeling that fear? You don't want to say the wrong thing? Well, go ahead. Thank you. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding. And kudos to you for speaking aloud, but a lot of people were thinking as well. But maybe we're afraid to say the wrong thing. Yes, it's obvious. As a black male on this planet, right? Unfortunately, I've been in so many scenarios where it is an issue, right? You know, I'm the only black man on a plane flying out here. Oh, can you help me with the bag? Well, no. Like, you got it up there. Like, what do I look like, right? I'm the only black man on the plane. Are you kidding me? But what I chose to do in this case is I decided to test first, right? Because yes, sometimes people do have problems and it's unfortunate. So I said, I'm having a dilemma. Can you help me choose? Like, which one is better, the raspberry vanilla or the gluten-free strawberry? Unzip. She kept flowing. I just shut her down. I was like, okay, yeah. So in other words, I could have read the situation wrong, but the only way I could find out is by engaging. Now, as she said, you know, we don't serve your kind, then, you know, it's not, right, right, okay. No, we gonna live stream this, right, right, okay, right? You're going down, okay. But what I'm saying is, I had to engage first, right? And so I think to the extent that we have the same opportunity, we don't know unless we actually go ahead and give it a go, right? And I think that when we talk about determination, does this not look beautiful? Yes, it is beautiful, and I'll tell you why. Not only is it beautiful in terms of the art, but it's beautiful in terms of what it represents. This was blank. It was just blank and tan, okay, to begin with. Our two founders, we don't have quite the same history you all have in terms of enslaved labor being used to make buildings. We were founded in 1873, hence 150 years this year, right? But these two gentlemen, our co-founders, did not, shall we say, because we wanted to study our impact of slavery, racism, and Confederacy. We did discover that they do have Confederate ties, okay? That we did discover that. So one of the key innovations was to put the Race and Reconciliation marquee to the left, right? We installed that early on to let people know that when you come back to campus, that we want to acknowledge that we don't have the answer, but we're working on it. And there's an invitation, scan the QR code, where you can be a part of this conversation as well. But more importantly, the brainchild with this mural was getting students involved. Oftentimes, I've been in so many meetings where us faculty, administrators kind of forget this detail that we're here because of students, right? We get caught up in our ideas, and that's good, but we're here because of students. And I think what's so beautiful about this is that students came together in an art class. We worked with the art professor, and they created the mural, and literally added color to our canvas plane. So what we're talking about is not just transforming the way we think, but literally, tangibly transforming the environment of our campus with our students' help. So in review, when we talk about research activity and community engagement, watch the letters. These are the steps, but it's always possible to remain open to the art of the possible. We must come together to move forward together. And when it comes to history and telling the whole truth, we should embrace our history and not erase our history, right? And so if what we say is true, then essentially we have nothing to fear. If what we say is true, then we can go to bed at night knowing that it's factual and it's simply a matter of us understanding the nuance of what happened. If what we say is true, then it's possible for us to shed our fear and apprehension about saying the wrong thing and becoming more invigorated and empowered over the ability to uncover and discover the future that we can create together, right? We don't have to be shackled by our past. We remain connected to it. We honor it. We understand it. But we have the power to influence our future. That's the magic of it. That's the brilliance. That's the beauty of it. I didn't say it was easy. I didn't say it's waving a magic wand. I didn't say this is hocus pocus in the sky, but I said it was possible. And so finally, in closing, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very appreciative of the time that you all gave me and the time that you give to our world out here. This is very important. We are still fighting the good fight, so may you do the best you can with what you have. God bless. Oh, sorry. I was just jamming over there. If anyone has any questions or what have you, feel free to go. I know you got class and et cetera, but thanks for coming. Yes, ma'am.
Or stepping into, I know it's a movie, so something came out, but in reality, if we're going to be fighting some fights, we have to do what you expect to do. You test the waters before pressing ahead.
Yes, that was absolutely a dramatized, version of the point. But at some point, I mean, whether it's starting a business, starting a family, there's an element of risk involved, right? I mean, we don't know for sure what's going to happen. And I think to the extent that you're emboldened by the facts, right, you have that foundation to stand on, and you have a willing team that is willing to focus on what is possible, that forward-focused optimism, I think it makes it easier to take that step, and test. I mean, again, maybe you're able to make that step when others are holding you up, right? That sort of deal. So yes, it's dramatized, but at the end of the day, there's still an element of risk. I know myself and my colleagues, had to put ourselves out there. We had to be willing to be vulnerable. And again, as you all know, there's many stories of colleagues who have paid the price. And so I'm grateful to hear of like a Dr. Twitty who was willing to make herself vulnerable and putting out the scholarship. And who knows? I mean, the campus might not be changed to the extent that it is, if she weren't willing to, go public, with her findings, right? Even though they were factual. So. That's, I think, the context of which I'm really trying to underscore is that there is an element of risk here, but when you see the potential for the positive results, hopefully it's a risk worth taking. Yes, ma'am.
I want to go back to your title. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
We had quite a few members of. I have a class on conversations about race.
Yes.
It's difficult. It's a very integrated class. Some of them are still here, but you also talked about going live and live streaming. So what do we say to our students? How do we tell them that it's okay to experiment or to be bold or to take risks, knowing that they can also be counseled with?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. No, that's definitely a tough one. I mean, nowadays, I mean, you could be at the grocery store and someone could be filming you, and you have no idea just what next faux pas could be the beginning of the end, so to speak. I think. Let me get to the live stream in a second. Within a classroom space, the beauty is that arguably you have more control, right? As far as making sure that that which is shared within the classroom space is honored and protected within that space, and also managing expectations at the very beginning about how exchanges will take place. And I think oftentimes conversation is inhibited when that palpable fear just prevents the simple question asking. So again, I mean, I'm not giving you a license to be rude and insult people, but I do want you to figure out, if you don't know something, how to go about finding that information and being okay and asking for an answer. And so again, that's maybe part of our jobs as instructors or leaders in community, is how do we go about fashioning those tools to provide to our students on what is a more diplomatic way, what is a much more empathetic way to ask that question. I had no idea you did your hair like that. If you ask me in that way, then you're going to receive a certain response. But if you come up to me thoughtfully and you're like, you know what, hey, listen, right, you might get a different response. In terms of live events, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no ultimate, I think, guardrail that we can set up. But I think, with that one, maybe going through more of as the sister who just departed was talking about, more of a vetting process. Because he was a graduate student, I felt comfortable. I worked with him for several months, and so we had rapport, we had trust, and so I didn't necessarily feel as if he would be saying something out of left field. This wasn't my student who didn't know who Emmett Till was, that I just put on and put the microphone in their face, right? So I think having a little bit more vetting, but at the same time, when it's live, and so there's that element of risk that takes place again. But how else can we learn if we don't try? Yes, sir.
I'd like to go back to how you mentioned the limits of education, exposure, and experience. And obviously, you've
Okay.
had great success at TCU, but just being honest, that's a private school in a really large metro area. So how do you think that would apply if you translated that? Let's just say day one, you mentioned how you got that chair spot.
Yes.
Going from Fort Worth to Oxford, Mississippi, public institution in a way different environment.
All right, and this is the last question, by the way, but I've cards. I could talk with those who are interested outside. In many ways, I think it's happening, right? When you look at the trail, the tour, the plaques, I think there's some elements there. But you're right, it's a dicey proposition. But I think, this is where maybe bringing in more student voices and propositioning them with problem solving. Hey, what is it that you all pay attention to? What about this first year experience? What is it that your friends are talking about? How do we go about making the education component more accessible? Because you know how it is, if I come in with facts and dates, the eyes glaze over and I feel as if you're bludgeoning me, right? So how do we create experiences that are fun? The last one in closing, I'll say as an example, was this. You're right, private institution, white, yes, absolutely majority. So how do you get majority white campus who is quite affluent, 70% paid their own way, right? Tuition's like $70,000. How do you get them involved? Well, here's the deal. I don't know how much they like history, but a lot of people, anyone in here would want a $250 gift certificate to American Airlines? Exactly. So what we did is I took part of my budget and I portioned off 4 250 certificates. And what we said is that let's create not a scavenger hunt, but a campus quest. We created 25 spots all around campus. The winning team of 4 would win the 4 round-trip tickets. Ladies and gentlemen, now look, whether they love the Black history or not, I don't know, but that day I had hundreds of, we had music, we had food, I had hundreds of students trampling over one another, running around on campus in the name of history. We gamified it, we made it fun, we spoke their language, fraternities, sororities, totally, this is awesome. My top 10 memory, exactly, but that's the point. There is a common context in the language and we can find it if we believe in the art of the possible. Thank you, God bless.